Benji, a sprightly 4-year-old with a mop of unruly brown hair, had a heart as big as the sky. He was the kind of child who radiated joy, his laughter ringing like bells in the stillness of the afternoon. Every day, without fail, Benji donned his favorite blue shirt with a cartoon dinosaur emblazoned on the front and set off on a little adventure to visit his neighbor, Mrs. Caroline. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a penchant for storytelling, always ready to share tales of times long past while savoring the homemade cookies Benji brought along. Their bond was one of pure simplicity, grounded in the innocent connection of youth and the wisdom of age. Before we dive deeper into Benji's heartfelt journey, I kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and is the key to sharing these beautiful stories about courageous little heroes with more people. It truly helps us continue our mission, so please consider subscribing now. One sunny afternoon, as the golden rays filtered through the leaves, Benji set off with a small tin full of chocolate chip cookies. He could hardly contain his excitement as he envisioned Mrs. Caroline's delighted face when she saw his surprise. Each step towards her door felt like a leap into a world of wonder, where every cookie offered was a ticket to another enchanting story of yesteryear. However, today would unfold differently than any tale he had ever heard. As he approached her quaint little house, adorned with vibrant flowers swaying gently in the breeze, Benji noticed the door slightly ajar. He knocked softly, his little knuckles barely making a sound against the weathered wood. "Mrs. Caroline, it's me, Benji," he called out, his voice bright and cheerful. The warm scent of homemade soup wafted through the door, mingling with the sweetness of the cookies in his tin. A moment later, Mrs. Caroline appeared, her silver hair catching the sunlight like spun gold. "Oh, my dear Benji," she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling with delight. "What a lovely surprise. Come in, come in." She ushered him inside, the familiar coziness wrapping around him like a warm blanket. Benji settled into his favorite spot on the couch, eagerly handing her the cookies he had baked with his mom. "These are for you, Mrs. Caroline, just like we made last week." He beamed, watching as she took a cookie and nibbled on it appreciatively. "Delicious, just as I remembered," she replied, her smile wide. They chatted for a while, sharing laughs and enjoying each other's company, the afternoon sun casting playful shadows around the room. But as they talked, something changed. Benji noticed Mrs. Caroline seemed a bit quieter than usual, her laughter fading as she reached for another bite of her soup. Suddenly, her expression shifted, and her eyes widened in alarm. She began to cough, her face turning a shade of deep crimson. Benji's playful demeanor instantly vanished, replaced by a surge of concern as he watched his dear friend struggle for breath. In that moment, the echoes of the CPR demonstration he had watched at preschool rushed back to him. The cheerful voice of his teacher, explaining how to help someone in distress, rang in his ears. Despite his small size and the enormity of the situation, Benji felt a spark of determination ignite within him. He had to help Mrs. Caroline. With his heart pounding, he rushed to her side, his tiny hands trembling as he remembered the steps he had seen. "Mrs. Caroline, I'm here. Just hold on," he urged, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of fear swirling inside him. He placed his little hands on her back, recalling the technique shown in class. He gave a gentle but firm push, hoping against hope that it would work. "Come on, Mrs. Caroline, please," he cried, his voice filled with an innocence that belied the gravity of the situation. Each attempt felt clumsy and insufficient, but Benji's resolve only grew stronger. He refused to give up, the love for his neighbor propelling him forward, even as he felt the weight of the world on his small shoulders. In between his efforts, he remembered the encouragement from his teachers, who often urged everyone to be brave and to believe in themselves. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, his tiny hands moving with painstaking care, trying to remember every detail of the demonstration. He could feel the desperation in the air, a palpable tension that made his heart race even faster. Benji's persistence paid off as he continued to apply his tiny frame to the task at hand. His determination was unwavering, fueled by the bond they shared, the countless stories exchanged, and the laughter they had enjoyed together. And just as it seemed the situation was becoming dire, a sudden sound erupted, a cough that echoed through the room, a powerful release that signaled hope. Mrs. Caroline gasped for air, her eyes widening with surprise and gratitude as the food dislodged from her throat. She looked at Benji, her expression a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "Oh, my dear child," she exclaimed, her voice shaky but filled with warmth. "You saved me." In that moment, the world around them faded, leaving only the two of them suspended in a bubble of relief and triumph. Benji felt a wave of exhilaration wash over him, the weight of fear lifting like a morning mist. He had done it. He had saved his friend. As Mrs. Caroline caught her breath, she enveloped Benji in a tight hug, the kind that spoke of gratitude deeper than words could convey. "You are my little hero, Benji," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Benji beamed, the warmth of her words filling his heart with joy. He had always admired Mrs. Caroline, and now, knowing he had made a difference in her life, he felt like he was floating on air. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting a golden glow around them, almost as if the universe itself was celebrating this small, yet monumental victory. Their moment of triumph was soon followed by the sound of footsteps as Benji's parents arrived, having come to check on him. Mrs. Caroline, still recovering from the scare, shared what had just happened, her voice trembling with emotion. Benji's parents listened in disbelief, their eyes wide as they absorbed the incredible story of their little boy's bravery. As they wrapped their arms around him, tears glistening in their eyes, Benji felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had not only saved a life, but had also forged an unbreakable bond that would resonate throughout the community. The news of his heroism would soon spread like wildfire, a tale of courage that would restore faith in the goodness of humanity. And just like that, Benji's life transformed from that of an ordinary boy into that of a tiny hero with a big heart. The echoes of laughter and stories lingered in the air, a testament to the incredible bond between a child and his beloved neighbor, reminding everyone that even the smallest among us can make the biggest difference. As Benji's parents knelt beside him, their arms enveloping him in a cocoon of love, the warmth of their embrace underscored the gravity of what had just transpired. His mother, her voice thick with emotion, whispered, "You are so brave, my sweet boy. I can't believe you had the courage to do that." His father, wiping a tear from his cheek, added, "You're a hero, Benji. You saved Mrs. Caroline's life." The words wrapped around Benji like a shield, granting him a sense of pride that felt almost too big for his small frame. He glanced at Mrs. Caroline, who was now sitting down, her hands trembling as she clutched his cookies, the remnants of their delightful afternoon. She smiled at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and Benji couldn't help but smile back, feeling a connection that transcended their ages. "Thank you, Benji," she said softly, her voice steadying as she caught her breath. "You've shown me what real bravery looks like. You're not just a little boy, you're a little miracle." Her words resonated deeply within him, sending ripples of warmth through his heart. He had always thought of himself as just a kid who liked cookies and stories, but now, in this moment, he felt like he had stepped into a much larger role. As the initial shock began to fade, Mrs. Caroline reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. "I think the world needs to know about what you've done," she said, her determination returning. "This is a story worth sharing." Benji watched in awe as she dialed a number, her voice firm and clear as she explained the situation. He didn't fully understand the importance of it at that moment, but he could sense that something significant was about to unfold. "Hello, yes. I'd like to report an extraordinary act of bravery by a young boy in our neighborhood," she said into the phone, her voice steady as she continued to recount the events of the afternoon. Benji's heart raced at the thought of becoming a part of something so grand, like a character in one of Mrs. Caroline's beloved tales. Meanwhile, his parents exchanged glances, a mixture of pride and disbelief etched on their faces. "We always knew he was special," his mother said, her voice filled with a fierce love. "But this is beyond anything we could have imagined." Benji felt his cheeks flush with warmth, the recognition swelling around him like a wave. He was just being himself, he thought, but perhaps that was enough to make a difference. As Mrs. Caroline finished her call, she turned to Benji, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "They're sending a reporter over to hear your story. You'll be famous, my little hero." The thought sent a thrill through Benji, a bubbling mix of joy and nervousness. He had seen reporters on TV with their cameras and bright lights, and now one would be coming to hear about his bravery. "Do you think they'll let me keep my cookies?" he asked, a cheeky grin spreading across his face, breaking the tension in the room. Laughter erupted, and for a moment, the weight of the situation lifted, replaced by the warmth of shared joy. Laughter was a balm, and in that moment, they all needed it. The afternoon slipped away as they waited for the reporter to arrive. Benji helped Mrs. Caroline clean up the kitchen, his small hands eager to assist. He wiped down the counters while she prepared a fresh pot of tea, the aroma filling the air with a comforting embrace. Each little task felt significant, like building blocks of a new foundation that would cement their bond even further. With every giggle and shared smile, the earlier tension transformed into an understanding that life had taken a beautiful turn. When the doorbell rang, Benji's heart skipped a beat. He exchanged a quick glance with Mrs. Caroline, and they both shared a knowing smile. This was a moment of significance, a chance to share their story with the world. Mrs. Caroline opened the door to reveal a young woman holding a notepad and camera, her bright smile illuminating the space. "Hi there, I'm Lisa from the local news station," she introduced herself, her voice warm and inviting. "I've heard about a brave little boy who saved his neighbor today. Can I speak with you?" Benji felt a mix of excitement and shyness wash over him, but Mrs. Caroline placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Of course. This is Benji, my little hero. He's the one who saved me," she said, her voice filled with pride. Lisa knelt down to Benji's level, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Benji, can you tell me what happened?" Benji, feeling a rush of emotions, nodded vigorously. "I was just visiting Mrs. Caroline, and she started to choke on her soup. I remember what my teacher showed us about helping people, and I tried my best." His words flowed out in a rush, a mixture of innocence and sincerity that pulled at Lisa's heartstrings. "That's incredible," she exclaimed, her voice filled with admiration. "You showed so much courage. Can you tell me how it felt to help Mrs. Caroline?" Benji thought for a moment, recalling the fear that had gripped him and the determination that had surged through him. "I was scared, but I wanted to help her because she's my friend. I didn't want anything bad to happen." His honesty was disarming, and Lisa could sense the depth of his feelings. "Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to care for others," Lisa said softly, her voice filled with a gentle wisdom. "And you did just that." As she continued to ask him questions, Benji found himself opening up about his bond with Mrs. Caroline, about the stories they shared and the cookies they baked together. Each word painted a picture of their friendship, a testament to the simple joys of life. He spoke of how Mrs. Caroline always made him feel special, and how he wanted to return the favor by helping her. Meanwhile, Mrs. Caroline listened intently, her heart swelling with pride for the little boy who had become her savior. She interjected with her own stories, recounting the many afternoons spent together, the laughter ringing through her home like the sweetest melody. After a while, Lisa turned to Mrs. Caroline, her eyes reflecting genuine admiration. "You've created a beautiful bond with Benji, and your story is so inspiring. It shows how love and friendship can transcend age. Would you like to share your thoughts on what happened today?" Mrs. Caroline's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "I've lived a long life, filled with ups and downs, but never have I felt so cherished as I do right now. Benji not only saved my life, he reminded me of the beauty in our connections. It's easy to forget that we are all capable of great love and courage, no matter our age or size." Her words hung in the air, resonating with a truth that felt profound. Benji's heart swelled with pride, knowing that their story was not just about a moment of crisis, but about the love that had blossomed between them. As the interview wrapped up, Lisa thanked them both and promised to air the story on the evening news. Benji felt a flutter of excitement at the thought of being on TV, but more importantly, he felt proud to share their story with the world. "Can you believe it?" Benji exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with joy. "We're going to be on TV." Mrs. Caroline chuckled, the sound light and joyous. And all because of a brave little boy with a big heart. In that moment, Benji realized that they had created something special, a story of courage, love, and friendship that would ripple through their community. Their lives, intertwined by chance and nurtured by care, had blossomed into a beautiful testament to the power of human connection. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the world outside, Benji felt a sense of peace settle within him. He had faced a challenge that he could never have imagined, and he had risen to meet it with bravery beyond his years. The little hands that had once simply shared cookies and laughter had proven themselves capable of so much more. If this story is touching your heart, make sure to comment from where you are hearing this amazing story. And as the evening rolled in, filling their small corner of the world with warmth and light, Benji realized that he had not only saved a life, but had also fostered a legacy of love that would inspire others to be courageous in their own lives. He had learned that even the tiniest among us could wield immense power, shaping the lives of those around us in ways that were nothing short of miraculous. With a heart full of hope and determination, he knew this was just the beginning. The world was vast, filled with stories waiting to be told, and he was ready to embrace every moment, knowing that he could be a hero in more ways than one. As the evening unfolded, laughter and warmth enveloped Benji, Mrs. Caroline, and his parents like a comforting quilt. The house, once filled with the echoes of panic, now resonated with joy as they shared stories of the day's events. Benji's heart danced with pride, not just for the attention he had received, but for the bond that had grown even stronger with Mrs. Caroline. "Do you think we could make a bigger batch of cookies tomorrow?" Benji asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "We could share them with everyone in the neighborhood to celebrate." Mrs. Caroline chuckled, her laughter a soothing melody. "That sounds like a wonderful idea. Everyone needs a little sweetness in their lives, especially after hearing about your brave actions." Benji's parents exchanged smiles, their hearts swelling with admiration for their son. "We'll help you bake as many cookies as you want," his mother promised, her voice warm and encouraging. "We can even make some special ones for the reporter when she comes back to cover your story." The thought of sharing cookies with the community filled Benji with excitement. He envisioned neighbors gathering, laughter echoing through the streets, and stories being shared over plates of warm treats. It was a celebration of love and compassion, and he would be at the center of it, the tiny hero who had sparked a wave of kindness. As the night deepened, the glow of the setting sun faded, giving way to the twinkling stars that began to dot the sky. Benji, snug in his bed, felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. His mind raced with thoughts of what tomorrow would bring. He could almost hear the whispers of the stories he would help create, the laughter of his friends, and the joy of sharing something meaningful with everyone around him. The next morning, the kitchen buzzed with activity. Flour dust danced in the sunlight streaming through the window, and the sweet smell of chocolate wafted through the air as Benji, his parents, and Mrs. Caroline worked together to bake batch after batch of cookies. Benji poured his heart into each scoop of dough, imagining the smiles they would bring to his neighbors' faces. When the cookies were finally ready, they packed them into bright boxes, each adorned with colorful ribbons. "These are not just cookies," Mrs. Caroline declared, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "They are tokens of bravery and friendship." With boxes in hand, they set off into the neighborhood, Benji's heart racing with anticipation. Each doorstep they approached echoed with laughter and chatter, as neighbors welcomed them with warm smiles and open arms. Benji's cheeks flushed with happiness as he shared his story, the tale of how courage could come in the smallest of packages. "Remember, it's not just about the cookies," he said, his voice earnest as he looked around at the gathering crowd. "It's about helping each other and being there when someone needs you." The crowd nodded, their expressions a blend of admiration and gratitude. They began to share their own stories of kindness, each one a thread woven into the fabric of their community. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the gathering turned into an impromptu celebration of love, warmth, and connection. With each shared cookie and heartfelt story, Benji watched as the magic of their bond spread, the kindness igniting a spirit of togetherness that enveloped the neighborhood. Laughter rang out, mingling with the sweet aroma of cookies, creating a symphony of joy that echoed through the streets. Days turned into weeks, and the story of Benji, the tiny hero, continued to ripple through the community. News coverage featured not just his act of bravery, but the profound impact it had on those around him. People from neighboring towns began to visit, drawn by the tale of a little boy who had reminded them of the power of caring for one another. Benji's school organized a special assembly to honor him, where students and teachers alike celebrated his actions with applause and admiration. He stood on the stage, his small frame beaming with pride, surrounded by friends who looked up to him as a role model. "Remember," he said to his classmates, his voice steady and clear, "you don't have to be big to be brave. You just need to care." As he spoke, he noticed Mrs. Caroline in the audience, her eyes shimmering with tears of joy. In that moment, he understood that their bond had transformed not only their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. As the months passed, Benji and Mrs. Caroline continued their daily visits, sharing cookies, stories, and life lessons. Each encounter deepened their friendship, a reminder that love knows no bounds, regardless of age. And so, the tiny hero with a big heart became a beloved figure in the community, a symbol of courage, resilience, and the simple act of kindness. His story would be told for generations, a reminder that even the smallest hands can create the most significant change, proving that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. With each cookie shared and every story told, Benji not only restored faith in humanity, but also inspired others to embrace their own potential for kindness. And in doing so, he had woven a tapestry of love that would endure, forever brightening the hearts of those around him.